Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Josh Guerrero here, and welcome to the All Around Adventure podcast. Whether you're joining me for the first time or you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, I certainly do want to welcome you here. And as always, I want to thank you for being here today. I just know that you're busy and that your time is important and you got a lot going on. I also know that there's a lot out there on the internet these days that's trying to get your attention. So the fact that you've chosen to download this podcast or log into YouTube to watch the video, to listen to what I had to say today, it really means a lot to me, and I certainly don't take it for granted. Now, if you are in fact new to this podcast and you're not entirely sure what we're all about here, this is a show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. Those will be stories from myself, of course, as well as the amazing guests that I welcome on this podcast. Though in this episode, you're just going to have me today. This is a solo cast. I don't really have a fancy name for these solo casts like I used to in the past. I had a couple of different names for some of the solo shows that I've done previously, but this is just simply, I guess, the solo show. And don't typically make these solo casts too terribly long, maybe about 10 to 15 minutes or so. Just want to give you something to think about on your Monday when these episodes go live, and something for you to chew on as you go into your week. Again, they're going to be some of my own stories or my experiences, or maybe just simply my own thoughts and ideas that I've had lately. Now, in this episode, you notice that the title is Step Off the Pavement. And I thought about this topic when I was reflecting on something that I did a couple years ago. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, or if you've been following me on social media, I am most active on Instagram at All Around Adventure. That's just one word with no dashes. But towards the end of 2021, I decided to through hike across the entire state of Michigan. And this was to raise money for a nonprofit that helps veterans called American Veterans Archaeological Recovery. And when I was doing this trek, I was following the North Country Trail. And the North Country Trail is a 4,800 mile long trail that extends from the Dakotas. I believe it's starts in North Dakota, South Dakota, one of the Dakotas. Could have gotten that messed up. And it extends all the way out through Vermont. The largest section of this trail goes through Michigan, which is about 1,200 miles. And I hiked the entire length of the Michigan section back in towards the end of 2021. Now, there's a certain part of the trail in Michigan's Upper Peninsula that goes through Tahquamenon Falls State Park. That's kind of towards like the northeast side of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And when I got there, it was quite, I'm not sure what word to use for this. I guess I'll say overwhelming, I would say, because from this point, most of the trail that I have hiked, coming from the Wisconsin-Michigan state line all the way up until now, and this was about maybe 400 miles of hiking that I had done up at this point, most of that was spent just in isolation. I was deep in the woods. Like, I think I might have only seen a couple of people on the trail for those 400 miles or so. But then when I got to Tahquamenon Falls State Park, it was a bit overwhelming just seeing all of the people. Like, this has become a very popular tourist destination in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And even though it was a Tuesday, there was just so many people there. There were literally tour buses pulling into the parking lot, offloading like large groups of people. And so just being around so much people like this, after being in isolation for so long, was very, very overwhelming. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know what to do here. There's so many people. It's like just like being so wild for most of that time. And just here I am, like completely surrounded, and it's so crowded. And of course, there's a good stretch of the trail that goes through this entire area, and I'm following on a digital map and everything like that. And of course, I stop, I see the falls, I take a minute for a minute, and then I guess one of the pros about being around so many people in this kind of more developed area of the park is that, you know, there are some places where I can get food. There was a couple of food trucks, and so I was able just to load up on calories and everything like that before I continued on. And so as I'm following my map, and I'm going along this section of the trail, a good part of that is paved. And I'll keep walking along this paved path, which it goes in line with the trail, and I'm following it, you know, seeing some more of the waterfalls and everything like that. And then eventually the pavement just stops and then it transitions into a primitive trail going into the woods. And then, of course, that's where I kept on going too. But there was something that I observed as I was moving along the trail here, and that is that most people stuck to the pavement, and only a very, very small few would actually go into the wilderness trails and explore that part of the park. Most people, just like I said, stuck to the pavement. And I kind of thought about this, and, maybe it was just simply a part of their plan. Maybe they only had like limited time, and so all they could see was just kind of sort of these highlights that were sort of within the area where the pavement was, or maybe they, being part of like arriving on the bus, they had a certain schedule that they had to keep. Maybe they were part of a tour or something like that, and just like going into the wilderness area was just simply not part of the itinerary. However, I feel like this is also just maybe a reflection of kind of society as a whole right now, where I feel like in this day and age especially, we are very, very attuned to seeking out comfort. And being in uncomfortable situations is something that many of us will try to avoid at all costs as much as we possibly can. And so I think even if someone had like the day to themselves at this park, I don't know if they would actually venture very much into the wilderness areas. I mean, like I said, some did, but I would almost dare say that most won't. Because being on the pavement, I feel like there's a few words that can be associated with being on like the pavement and in this developed area. It's safe, it's predictable, it's tamed, civilized, maybe a couple things like that, easy, comfortable. Whereas if you were to step off the trail and go deep into the woods, there's a few words that can be associated with that. Wild, unpredictable, potentially dangerous, and, uncomfortable to say the least. So I think that's why maybe a lot of people decided to stay on the pavement. Because if you think about it, it's like every single step that you make is more or less the same. You kind of sort of fall into a routine. It's just you can step along the pavement and pretty much know that your feet are going to land the exact same way every single time. Where if you step off and go into the wilderness trails, you're going to have to dodge some rocks, some protruding roots. There's could be some elevation gain and things like that. Maybe you have to go through some weedy spots. You're going to get attacked by insects and all these other things too. So definitely quite the contrast to being on a flat, predictable surface like pavement versus the not so predictable surface going through the woods. However, going through the woods, there was some things that I was able to kind of experience that I wasn't able to experience when I was on the pavement. Obviously, like I said, it was a little bit more challenging having to, dodge like protruding rocks and roots, going up and down hills. It was a little bit more exhausting. I did get attacked by bugs. However, I got to see a part of the park that, like I said, so many other people didn't get to experience. And there was sort of a little bit of a peace and serenity around that too, especially because I more or less had those experiences to myself for the most part, with, like I said, the occasional few who did decide to wander off the pavement and go out and explore. And so, and then of course, as always, getting myself into these challenging situations, there's a lot of growth that happens too. Of course, you develop characteristics like fortitude, perseverance, strength, and just simply getting comfortable with being uncomfortable as well. And that's just really, synonymous with just everyday life just as well too. Some of you may have heard this quote before, but it's kind of one that I've come to live by quite a bit. And that is that life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. Or you can also word this as, yeah, the comfort zone is a nice place, but nothing ever really grows there. It's when we step out of our comfort zone into the unknown, into the tough things, or maybe go out and do things that scare us. That's where we're going to experience the most amount of growth in our lives. And if you're listening to this podcast, or like I said, watching on the video, then I'm sure you're kind of the same mindset that I'm talking about here. So definitely don't be afraid to step into the unknown, get out of your comfort zone, and go out and, get those benefits that come with doing hard things. To achieve the things in life that most people won't, you have to be willing to do the things that most people don't. And that's really all I have to say on that really quick. Like I said, I don't really make these solo casts too terribly long, just something for you all to think about as you go into your week. If you did enjoy today's episode of the All Around Adventure podcast, make sure you share this episode with your friends and family, post it on social media. Also, feel free to connect with me over on Instagram. That is where I'm most active. My handle is at All Around Adventure. That is one word with no dashes. You can also subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. I'm on all major platforms. And like I said, we also have the All Around Adventure YouTube channel where you can watch the video versions of the solocast as well as all of my guest interviews. All right, everyone. I want to thank you very much again for tuning in today. I greatly appreciate it, and I certainly don't take it for granted. And be sure to check in next Monday when I release a brand new episode featuring another fantastic guest. Other than that, go out there and keep on getting after it. Have an amazing week.